For those that don't know me, my name is Darryl Mead. I'm the head of employee experience at Emperor. And today's session, I've been having lots of conversations with clients kind of almost every day about what happens next post-COVID and where do we go from here and what does a workplace look like and what about hybrid working? There's so many questions that are kind of on the minds of every organization at the moment. And also as a business, if we look at the work that we're doing with our clients, culture, purpose, brand, sustainability, reputation, all converging into one thing for companies now. So how companies manage their story and how they present themselves to the world and to their stakeholders is really, really vital. But ultimately, it's still all about the people. People are at the heart of the business, and the workplace is changing like never before. There's many factors that are reshaping it, disrupting it, innovating it, and we're going to have a look at some of these today. I'm delighted to be joined today on the session by Sasha Scott, who is the CEO and founder of Inclusive Group, who are one of the top 10 diversity companies in the global diversity list for 2020. Really exciting. So welcome, Sasha.
Thank you very much, Darren. Lovely to be here, and hello to all these faces. Excellent.
Let's just have a look and set the scene a little bit. Sasha, do you want to talk about what is EDI and why is it important now?
Okay, massive question. What is EDI? Well, first of all, I think that it's important to actually be very clear on the terminology and the language around this enormous topic, because the acronyms are changing day by day on this. It's becoming now common parlance to refer to EDI as equity, diversity, and inclusion, but we've had multiple connotations of this. And one of the things I would say is historically in the UK, it's been referred to as D&I. But actually, when we look at organizations that do this really well, and I absolutely fundamentally believe this, you've got to prioritize the I over the D. So when we're looking at EDI, we're looking at equity, and that's not treating everybody the same. That's making sure that there are adjustments made, that everybody has the same opportunity. Diversity is about difference. It's about you, it's about me, it's about being a human being. It's very easy to think about diversity as just about marginalized communities, in particular people of color, gender, etc., etc. Yes, it's that, and that's incredibly important. But diversity is slightly terrifying, often to straight white men, because it feels an anathema, different, threatening, nothing to do with me. And I know I'm making some gross generalizations here. But actually, I think that in order to meet people where they're at, when you're trying to implement strategy and actually put this into concrete actions, we need to take everybody with us. So diversity within the corporate narrative, from our perspective as a diversity consultancy that works in 23 countries with over 1 million professionals, diversity is about being a human being. And inclusion, and this is the really key thing here, is fundamentally different from diversity. But because the two words are put together synonymously, it's very easy to think they're one and the same, and they are not. And this is the one thing I would really say to everybody. I'm sure I'm talking to seasoned professionals, so you get this. But inclusion is a choice. And I'm writing a book at the moment called Inclusion is a Verb. And when I was at school 1 million years ago, I remember my English teacher saying to me, Sasha, a verb is a doing word. And that, for me, is everything. Inclusion is a choice, and it's a choice every human being makes at every kind of human contact point you have, whether it's Zoom, Teams, face to face, about how we behave. And when I look at organizations that punch above their weight on this, the reason they've done well, right, and measurement is utterly key, because then we can actually assess how well are people doing, organizations, is because they have prioritized the I over the D, and they have made the adjustments for equity, right? So putting inclusion front and center is imperative. um why now? Well, Darryl, you've really exemplified why now. The fact that every day you're having conversations about this with your clients, says why now. Well, now is a very, very urgent time for organizations to respond. I mean, in a nutshell, 2020 was a landmark year. for multiple events around the world. Black Lives Matter being the most seismic shift in organisations, are changing their corporate narrative and looking much more at social justice and responding to this rather than that's a thing out there and it won't affect my people. In addition to that, I mean, obviously, we've just had a lot of celebrations this week around International Women's Day, International Women's Month. COVID has been a pivotal time in terms of parity and equality, and the fact that the disproportionate impact of COVID on women is incredibly important. I think that women's jobs are about 1.8 times more vulnerable to the impact of COVID than men's, and 39% of global employment places are made up by women, but women account for 54% of job losses. So, why now? Well, it's, I think, a combination of multiple factors, of which I've just cited two.
We'll look at some of the other themes in a moment. Thanks. This next diagram here is something that some of you may have seen. It's actually a model that we use to help shape a corporate narrative. And as you can see, it's about finding the why, how, what, who, and where of how you have and create an authentic story for an organization. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think it's really important just to think about from a why now perspective. It's really important that EDI actually is very core as an element right through the whole story, right from the purpose at the top and the vision about why you exist, where you're going and what you stand for, right down through strategy and how you achieve that and your values. How you work and what you stand for should actually be really integral to the EDI story, should be really integral to that. And more importantly, I think it's important to consider the story through the lens of the stakeholders. So you'll see kind of the core value proposition groups in the middle there: customers, employees, investors, and society, and communities even. Thinking about and putting the lens of EDI onto those stakeholder groups when you're developing the story or developing messages, both internal and external, is actually critical to do. And I think the last point around this is probably one about ownership. We can talk about who owns EDI and where does it fit, who owns culture, because it could fit into that space. It's actually a business imperative. So we need to make sure that it's not just something that is owned by HR because it's a diversity program. It's actually a business imperative. It has to be owned by the leadership team at the top. It has to be championed. And most importantly, I think, has to be understood by all the leaders and understood the value. And there's a lot of, nuance in the language, as we'll get to a little while. Nuance of the language and the initiative and the approach and how you do things requires a level of understanding and education, and also champion from the top of the business. So a really important part. So let's just have a look at some of the themes. What's shaping the landscape at the moment?
Sure. Well, just want to go into a little bit more depth about Black Lives Matter because, I've been doing this 20 years, and I think for everybody last year, it was absolutely horrific. But certainly, our assessment of COVID and its impact in relation to diversity has been, and it's very much evidence that COVID's had a very disproportionate impact on diverse marginalized groups. Whether that be the digital divide around social mobility, whether that be around working mothers, as previously cited, definitely around people of colour. And then when we were at home and work became, sitting in the palm of our disinfected hands, we saw the brutal murder of George Floyd, and obviously many Black people have preceded that. And I think it was a moment in time because the world had effectively stopped, and that played out in real time. And as a diversity consultancy, we've never seen anything like it because, as I mentioned just before, the corporate narrative started to really change around what are we going to do about this? And this really matters. So we saw countless organizations globally black out their Instagram feed and started to listen more to Black voices within the organization in terms of lived experience. And I'm a huge believer in listening. I think inclusion and listening are inextricably linked. So people listened and voices were heard. And now we're March. And what's going to happen next? I think a takeaway from today is authenticity and accountability. Because if organizations don't really deliver and tackle structural racism, institutionalized racism, and equity, they're going to get called out. It's performative to black out an Instagram feed. What are you actually going to do? This is why EDI coupled with ESG sits in the boardroom and will not go away. So that was a game changer, is a game changer. And as Darryl mentioned, I'm worried about how we are going to lead our future workforce in a post-pandemic, asynchronatic, hybrid work environment. A lot of people we've talked to over the last 6 months, in corporate US, UK, Europe, say that they're almost sleepwalking back into this new normal, this sort of 5:2 or 3:2 ratio. And what worries me is I'm not sure people are really thinking about how inclusion's going to play back when I think you're going to get a three-tiered workplace. You're going to get, and a lot of that can be cut geographically and demographically and age-wise, but I think you're going to get a workplace where there are those people that are desperate to get back in and desperate for the human social company, and really important if you're onboarding or young within the workplace to have people around you to learn and develop with. Then you're going to get people that never want to go back in. This has been a thriving experience, and I don't ever want that hideous commute into London Bridge. And then you're going to get the floating group that are going to move between. Who has thought about the leadership capability to manage and lead in an inclusive hybrid working environment? I don't think this is even being thought of properly. And this is going to take a whole new set of skills around inclusion, which is another reason why inclusion has ramped up another notch. And that inextricably linked with wellness and well-being and resilience. Last year, we saw a 550% rise in new inquiry post BLM from organisations that recognised that they needed to do more around inclusion and diversity. And we've seen a 600% rise in clients saying, could you talk to us about resilience, mental health? This stuff is inextricably linked. Again, how are we going to manage this when people are going to be more stressed about, actually, am I less valued because I'm at home the whole time? Because my manager, who may well be younger than me, believes that there is a premium associated to being in the office more, that presenteeism. So workplace culture is going to be really difficult to establish. It's easy enough to write, stuff on the workplace walls, embed it into the brickwork, write it in the comms. But actually, we all know on this call, our lived experiences, what does a culture feel like to me? Is it a culture where I belong, where I feel a part of something, where I'm valued, where I have a voice and I am heard? How safe do I feel? And again, organizations need to really understand the impact and influence of psychological safety and how that inextricably links with inclusion. And again, I don't think that organizations at a boardroom level, or indeed a flow through, really get that relationship between psychological safety and inclusivity. So there is a lot of work to be done. Over to you, Darryl.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, back to you.
Oh, indeed. That's what happens when you don't slide share. You forget what next. So I love this slide. It's not ours. It's from McKinsey's, but I use this a lot when we do facilitation. Depending on where you're at, what's your business-led approach to inclusion and diversity? What we are going to see a lot more boardroom positions where the person is tasked with EDI and probably wellness. There's an intersect between this and ESG. The S and the G speak to, again, diversity and accountability. but you need a systemic business-led approach where representation, particularly at leadership level, ramps up. Yes, we've had some progress around gender, but to be perfectly frank, there's a lot more needed. Don't think about diversity in buckets, think about intersectionality. I'm a woman, I happen to be gay, so there's an intersect. What happens if I'm trans and I'm black? And what does that look like? I may have a disability. So when I look at organizations that do this well, it's business led, there's accountability. People know what good looks like, and poor behavior is not tolerated, not swept under the carpet. We've seen a flurry of big firms, law firms, banks, corporates hit with allegations of misconduct. The regulators are climbing all over this. The world changed with Harvey Weinstein and Me Too and Time's Up. And, again, accountability, transparency is key. It's also about process. It's a hell of a lot easier to debias a process than is a person. Tackling openness around reporting, around clarity, and fostering a belonging culture by supporting multivariate diversity. So what does that mean? That means, how capable are your managers at fostering belonging in a hybrid, asynchronatic work environment? One of my lived experiences, and I used to work in investment banking for my sins for 13 years before I transformed myself into a diversity consultant, was looking across the trading room floor of a very, very well-known Swiss investment bank, thinking 30% of the people in this room are managers. What makes them the managers? And the answer was, they're good at their job. They make money. But that doesn't mean you're good at leading and fostering belonging through supporting diversity in its many different forms, which is why, again, I strongly believe there is merit in unconscious bias interventions, as long as they're curated and they're contextualized, and it's not seen as the golden bullet that's going to fix everything.
Let me just to create an inclusive culture, because I'll just pick up on one of your points earlier there. As you mentioned, culture and inclusivity are inextricably linked, and the two trends that are kind of really emerging at the moment are about, as you say, the normalization of this kind of blended remote work. How does that work? And this reinvigorated kind of focus on EDI initiatives. But at the heart of it, they're both about culture, and a lot of our clients talk about culture, report on culture, and really continue to kind of struggle to make sense of, how do I describe it and what's it all about, and what's important and what should I focus on. Interesting, I was looking at some research from a company called MIT Sloan, and they run a league in the United States called the Culture 500, which measures and compares 500 companies across 9 culture dimensions. And obviously, there's very different results by sector across 500 companies, as you'd imagine, but their research found that there was actually only 3 commonalities across the top performers. And no surprise, the first one was about strong financial performance drives a successful culture. The second one was about female leadership. More women in leadership roles equals a more diverse, more inclusive, and a better cultural outcome. And also, just to pick up on a point that Sasha has made, the third factor was psychological safety. So that's where people can have that honest discussion, the feedback to listen to, and supported and feel like they belong. So I think those are really 3 brilliant indicators. If you're looking to think, how can we develop our culture? Think about your financial performance. Think about how you represented in leadership roles, and what does that look like in terms of diversity? And what does psychological safety actually mean in practice for you? What are you doing? So interesting, another question I'm often asked is about, how do we maintain this culture when we have remote working? What do we actually do? And I think that stems from the thinking that culture is associated with the office, those kind of visible social aspects of culture which we see, which is about the camaraderie and the mixing and the water cooler conversations and all those kind of close physical interactions. But what happens when you can't have that, when people aren't present? There's an assumption that people will miss out. So once again, it's about psychological safety. That if that's a top factor in strong cultures, the question is actually not, how do I maintain my culture? How do I create an inclusive culture where people feel like they can belong no matter where they work? They're represented, they can connect, they can actually be part of the organization. So I thought we'd have a look just at the employee life cycle now and just talk about um, how we might do that. So I think the point, just to step back to the point about disruption and innovation, I think before we kind of go through the cycle here, disruption to me is about challenging how you've done things, shaping new processes, and actually working through the lens of inclusivity and EDI in general and thinking, gosh, how can we change what we're doing to get a different outcome and create a better, more robust business? And innovation is not just about the technology, and clearly many organizations have jumped in with innovative tech and moved that agenda forward rapidly to connect people. But it's actually about how you innovate and be creative around how you connect, how do you share and listen and respond, and the ways you actually join up the business, I think. Sasha, do you have anything more you want to say about disruption and innovation before we move on?
Yeah, sure. To build on that, I think it leads a lot to mindset as well around diversity. So, just to sort of anecdotally, a lot of the resistance that we encounter, our clients feel around diversity, happens not in the boardroom, but slightly lower down the organization at a hiring stage. That even though, let's say, the organization's got strong D&I aspirations, targets, quotas, etc., and HR get it and have an inclusive blind recruitment process, that hits a wall often when the line has to look at this diverse slate and effectively says in a sort of subtle way, these diverse people won't fit, that they won't fit here. What that actually means, if you unpack it, is that's actually going to be quite difficult to manage because I've got a relatively homogenous team and everyone gets on well and we all make money. So, why would I want that? Or I've had a strong confirmation bias because I've hired someone diverse before. It's been a tricky one to manage. I don't want to go there. And diversity is therefore, often I think linked with disruption, which can mean that people have a sort of headache capacity around it and a diversity fatigue, and it hits that sort of metaphorical wall. So the way I turn that is by saying, actually, what we need to do is educate people that diversity is about opportunity, it's about talent, it's about difference, and it's about the need for disruption. Because whilst things might look quite rosy in some environments, actually 2020 taught us a lot about disruption and reimagining and evolving into a new, more innovative workplace. In order for organizations to stay relevant, they've had to repurpose, whether I am a gin distiller that now makes hand sanitizer, a luxury brand that now makes PPE, a Formula One car manufacturer that now makes ventilators. In order to stay relevant, we have seen amazing examples of innovation and disruption. And what we need to do, I think, internally within cultures of organizations is get the resistance, the mindset that's closed, to become more open. And how you do that is by igniting a fire under people to recognize motivation comes from lots of different ways. And data here can be your friend in terms of demonstrating the dividend that comes with diverse workplaces, and how inclusion, again, tons of data out there shows that inclusive workplaces are more productive. People do their best work. If people feel authentic, they're less anxious, less worried. And again, you get that connect. And there are so many compelling arguments about the why behind this. I think the trick is to make sure that you understand the people who work for you and then work hard at raising awareness around why diversity and innovation are good for business.
Great. So if we have a look at, some just some ideas, and we thought we'd just have a look at the employee life cycle as a way to think about what are some of the touch points and what are some of the areas to consider about how you might build an inclusive culture, some kind of practical things as well. So let's start with attract. This is a piece about, how do you attract people to your business? And obviously EDI messaging must be part of your employee value proposition. So what you're promising to candidates and employees, basically, what's the get-give relationship? It's obviously clearly really important to make sure that everybody feels represented, that they feel like, oh, I can be part of that, I can belong to that organization, and that has something for me, and it has a place for me. Very, very important. And also look, how are you representing your business on your website? How are you presenting your social media posts in terms of images and language? Does it feel like invitational? Is it positioned right? Are you using the right language? And the importance of language can't be underestimated. And there's a really lovely example that my colleague Helen shared the other day in terms of job ads. Very often we see job ads and companies wanting to find dynamic, outgoing, resilient people who work great as part of a team and want to lead. There's a very kind of positive, outperformance kind of type of attributes for people. But very rarely do you see anyone advertising for a deep, reflective thinker who works well on their own. Yet thinking about people who might be exactly that can contribute on a completely different level. I think that's something really to consider about, are we really appealing to people who might be introverts or have different skill sets? Not everybody has to be the big shouty leader. I mean, and also in terms of language, we're having some really interesting discussions around specific language, particularly the word minority that I was reading. It is potentially not the right word to be using, because actually it pits people who are perceived to be a minority against other people who are not, which may not be helpful. And even the terms like BAME and LGBTQI+. I don't think we can assume that everybody within each of those groups actually has the same lived experience, and their experience that they bring to the organization or they as a person is going to be completely different. So we're starting to see some different language arising out of that. I think that's a really important aspect to consider, but quite nuanced. The recruit piece is definitely all about thinking about, what's the experience, what are the touch points that the candidate or the employee has with our business, right from as I said, the website, the job ad, how we respond, how we interview, how we place people, who we meet. How does that all? What are those touch points, and what are the points where we might need to consider either inclusive language or thinking about the experience there for people. And I've got remove culture fit and gut feel. I mean, these are two words that over my career of years, I've always, worked in companies said, oh, they're a great culture fit. And I've just got this really good gut feel about that person. I think they'd be great here. We have to be very careful with those because they do play to bias, and they often play to bias, which, is a limiting factor and may just naturally exclude some people who may have different skills to offer. So we like to think about culture add is probably the better term to think about. And just generally, I think, can everybody apply? Are we making it easy for everybody from, millennials, young Gen Z, right up to older people to apply? Can they understand what we're talking about? Is it easy to be part of our business? The onboarding experience clearly is key. It's all about being welcoming. New research by Aon showed that, interestingly, under half of employers, only 44% of employers have a formal wellbeing strategy in place too. So, what does that look like? As wellbeing, as we've talked about, is so critical to the experience, and supporting people, mind, body, and soul is important. Have you got a wellbeing strategy, and can you actually help people feel like they belong, support their needs, their different personal situations, their home, their fitness, their health? What does that look like? And focusing on values, particularly those values that promote openness, about support, about listening, understanding, those kind of the values which help you be an open organization, help people be curious, ask questions, find out and learn about each other. And it also has to be modeled by leaders. The develop piece is all about developing, and I think, Sasha, you touched on new skills for managers. I think it's an absolutely critical area which is underdeveloped at the moment, about how do we help managers build their skills to lead different teams. That's skills around, it's probably more the soft skills, empathy, listening, responding, understanding, all of those things which may not come naturally to some leaders. Really important to start developing those. Creating proximity and connection. This is, again, really important point around remote workers when you've got dispersed, office versus home workers. Proximity is all about, has someone got visibility? Can they easily share their ideas with the business and be connected? It's about fairness and equity. We make sure everybody has a voice, listening to those, quieter voices versus the loud voices. Are we creating kind of a sense of place and belonging that is about the work that we do rather than the place that we do it? And that's going to be created through how we connect, how we listen, how we communicate, to help build what I call and I've read about as social capital. So what are the social skills and what's our capital? How can we make sure that can express our opinion, our voices heard, and we can share our ideas? And then, provide speaking opportunity, provide a platform for people who have different stories to tell. And I know at Emperor we're doing a lot of that through sharing stories and listening and different people's experiences and photos right throughout lockdown in the last year, just about raising the visibility of everybody, I think. Engage. This is about conversation and stories. So, one of the things that we're doing in the business is midweek matters, which, getting people together to talk about a particular topic, something that's topical and on people's minds. We had a fantastic series of conversations about race, which was facilitated, and everybody had found them extremely helpful, emotional, and quite uplifting and humbling, really, just to have a forum where we could get together and share our experience about race and what that means to each of us. And everybody got a very, very different story. And interesting, one of our clients, RB, their CEO, Laxman, does a regular session where he invites people to come and join a conversation with him as the CEO. They're called Stronger Together conversations, and Stronger Together is their platform for their diversity and inclusion, which they have a big focus on. And for them, it's about starting with conversation. Recognition, obviously, that plays to the kind of speaking opportunities point. Make sure that everybody has a voice. You're recognizing different experiences and different achievements, not just the people who are outperforming their sales targets or numbers or the kind of big obvious targets. Recognize the people who might be a bit of anti-heroes, the people who are flying under the radar, that may not have the voice and recognition that others. So employee resource groups, that's something that I'm hearing quite a lot of springing up. Many companies are inviting people to either set them up or be part of. And again, really important for visibility and representation. So people feel they've got a place to go where it's safe. They feel that they've got a voice and a collective voice. It's actually about the collective.
Darryl, can I just jump in there on the ERG? Because again, I think it's really critical for organisations to recognise how important those groups are. But again, to get it right, these have to be inclusive groups. And where we see organisations doing brilliantly on this capitalisation is where you harness the power of allies. And allies are very, very linked to the employee network groups or the ERGs, etc. So it's certainly, as we go into 2021, about allyship, visibility, understanding those lived experiences, as Darren says, the voices and the representation. So it sort of funnels all the way through, and that attraction point, just to add to that, is really critical, obviously, and it's why we're working so closely with Emperor in terms of helping people understand what exclusion can look like visually and in words and language. Never ever see EDI as just sitting in one area. It's got to be inextricably part of everything an organization does. I like cooking, and it's that secret sauce that's got to be baked into everything. It's not a side of desk, it's not an HR job. This is why I'm excited that it's increasingly becoming a board position. But I just really want to make that point about ERGs. Think about allyship, please, and intersectionality.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you. So when you look at building an inclusive culture, the culture is actually the culture you have is the outcome of doing some of these things. I mean, there's a far from an exhaustive list of the things you can do, but just kind of a top line thinking about what's the lens. We put the inclusivity lens across your employee life cycle. You actually need to start thinking about doing some things differently, disrupting and innovating in the way you do things. I wanted to share just an example of one of our clients, a IHT hotel group, and they have just recently launched this last month their Journey to Tomorrow, which is their responsible business strategy and plan. for the next 5 years. And we've worked with them on a couple of pieces here, which I'll share. The first one is a colleague guide. So what they wanted to do here, they have 6,000 hotels around the world, so a very dispersed, diverse, very large employee base. And so part of that communications plan is actually making sure that the Journey to Tomorrow, the strategy, gets into people's hands, and in a way that actually helps them understand not only just what is the strategy, but more about what can I do, how do I be involved, what kinds of things can I do to make a difference. And so this is just a couple of shots from the colleague handbook that we produced and they've delivered. You can see on the right there, championing a diverse culture where everyone can thrive is one of the 5 key pillars of their strategy, along with a couple of, I'll share a video in a moment. But the point around this is like helping people understand, okay, if it's about waste, what can I do? If it's about water, what can I do? How can I be involved? Who do I contact? If I've got stories to share, how do I share those and who do I send them to? So really just to create that culture of sharing, listening and involvement, really, because the strategy is only as good as the people that activate it, and mobilizing the people to deliver it is what it's all about. So this is the start of that journey for them, Journey to Tomorrow. So I just thought I'd play the animation, which kind of gives some context to that. So I think just back to the point that I made at the beginning, that's an example, I think, of where diversity and inclusion and equality and involvement in activating the strategy sits right across the whole narrative. So that sits from why you exist. That's actually part of their business strategy. So you can see it's an example of connecting culture, business strategy, and brand strategy all up together. If you wanted to talk to us about this, we've obviously covered quite a lot of ground today, and whether your opportunity is from a very strategic point of view about developing a strategy, or right down to something more tactical, or it's about leadership or culture. What we're offering is, book a 30-minute inclusivity session with either Sasha or both of us or myself, where we can just have a chat, because I know that everybody's at a different position, different starting position. Every business is different. So, we're happy to have a chat and uncover any opportunity and how we might be able to support you. Sasha, anything else for that one?
No, I would just say, that invitation is open to absolutely everybody, and please do reach out. We are working closely with Emperor. We're an organisation that's been in this space for 20 years, and I think that's actually important, because it's become very deeply fashionable to be involved in anything to do with this, and it's an unregulated industry. And our testament are our clients, that we've worked with over 1 million professionals in 23 countries, but we do give a very bespoke personal service, and we're very interested to talk to you. So come and have a cup of inclusivity. There you go. Love that play on words.